What we're trying to do today is bring and help a concept that sometimes gets really short shift as far as a lot of writers are concerned. Lots of times when you hear a couple of writers talking, they begin to argue, what's the most important thing? Is it plot or is it character? And they say, well, we talked about plot a couple of weeks ago. We said, hey, you have to start fast and keep moving. You've got to hang on to your reader. So the plot's important. And character, of course, that's important, because if people don't like your character, they're not likely to stay with your story. And you need to keep building on that character. And we don't want a lot of backstory and all that sort of stuff. Guess what? I think these arguments are important, but they miss the point. A critical factor that a lot of people forget is setting. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And I would say that for those of you that were able to join me on Point of View, I think you'll find that Point of View is a lot of help as you develop your setting. If you were not able to join last time, I plan to review that a little bit, because I think it's critical to understand how you can get inside your character's head and show people what you want to show them. And the thing is, every story has a context. Your reader, your hero, and all the other people in the story, they're just not hanging out in space. They've got to be someplace. So what we need to do is develop a world for your character and for your readers. Now, it's not a real world, but it's nonetheless a world that lives and breathes, that changes and grows and acts on your character, or could be indifferent to your character. And that's your choice. And that's what makes setting so exciting and interesting. Now, setting is more than just the description of rooms and landscape. It's the fashion. It's the human outlook. The essence is bringing people into this place. And that's what you want to do. You just don't want to write, hey, I'm sitting today, here I am. I'm sitting in the den. I'm talking to my friends. I'm looking at my computer. But so what? People are not going to get very excited about that. They're going to want to know how I feel about that. What's going on in my world and what's going on in your world. So you need to set the atmosphere around your story. Just don't create a scene, build a world. I say again, build your world and then turn your characters loose in that world. And I call it setting the table. And that's what you need to do. Your reader wants to live in your world. And you know why? Because he or she is probably a little tired of living in this world because of everything that's going on, hibernation and all that other stuff. But put them in another world where they can get excited about something. They can feel all the excitement building and all that. And what you want to do, if you can, is to put your reader into what I call a fictional dream. And that fictional dream, he or she's going to stay with you in that dream and take your story and just love it as you build on it. But if you dump 50 pounds of backstory in on them or whatever, you're going to pull them right out of that fictional dream. If he or she doesn't know what's going on where he is, that's going to be another problem. So the key is not really how a place looks. How it makes the reader feel, how it makes the hero feel. So you got the psychological effect of that character. Does it make the character happy? Does it make him sad? Does it make him mad? Okay, now we're going to go back. Remember, we developed our biography. And you need to know what your reader's like. What are his pluses, her minuses, the things that she likes, that he likes, and the things that different settings are going to react. And so your reader is going to benefit from the social things, context that's going on around your character. Okay, different settings, not surprisingly, affect different people differently. Your description reveals your character's state of mind. And this is all going to be filtered through the character and the character's eyes. And that's why point of view is so incredibly important. Many of you are probably familiar with Donald Moss. Donald Moss is a wonderful agent. He wrote and taught a workshop, and he wrote a book on how to write the breakout novel. I was fortunate to attend his workshop and buy his book, and I read through part of it. And here's one that I think is very important. He cites Anne River Siddons. I'm sure many of you know Anne River Siddons, have read her books. She is very good at evoking the world of the Tidewater. And then in her 1997 novel, Upland, Molly Bell goes back to, goes to a site because she's just gone through a very painful marital breakup. Now, Siddons doesn't tell you that she's upset because of the marital breakup, but she shows you through the way that the setting where her heroine is, the way it's described. And let me just briefly read to you. The house stood in full sun on the slope of the ridge. That seemed to sweep directly up and into the steel blue sky. Below it, the lane I had just driven on wound through low, dense woodlands where the Jeep had plunged in and out of dark shade. But up here, there was nothing around the house except a sparse stand of wind-studded oaks, several near to collapsing outbuildings, and 2 or 3 huge freestanding boulders left. I knew by the receding glaciers that had formed the island. Above the house, the ridge beetled like a furrowed brow, matted with the low-growing blueberry and huckleberry bushes. At the very top, no trees grew at all. I looked back down and caught my breath at the panorama of Chillimark Pond and the Atlantic Ocean. It was a day of strange, erratic winds and running clouds below. The work vista below me seemed alive, pulsating with shadows and sun and trees. I had to turn. It disquieted me. So I turned to face the closed door of the big house. I had come here seeking shelter of the upland woods, but this tall, blind house, alone in its ocean of space and dazzle of hard, shifting light, offered me no place to hide. So as Anne River Siddons displays this and talks about it, you can understand that Molly is very sad and very upset. Now, another thing you can do, if you want to take a moment and go back and just don't do very much, but just say, the last time I was here, it was a place of joy, but here it offered me no comfort, or something like that, to help explain, indeed, this is a very special time, and she's having a lot of trouble because of her marital breakup. Now, another tip as you begin to create your setting. So many people tend to use kitchens, living rooms, offices. Oftentimes we meet in offices. And those are daily things that your reader is going to all the time. They are familiar. They're very easy to the reader, and probably exactly what you don't want. Instead of that office or the living room, think about a canyon. Put your reader on the edge of a canyon, or in a sports stadium, or in an airport, or on a life raft, or in a recovery room in a hospital. A place that's different, that right off the bat is going to pull different feelings from your reader. You know, I sit in my office all the time. Pretty hard for me to get excited about my office. But if I'm on the edge of the Grand Canyon, now that's a different issue again. Now, the other thing you can do to sometimes make it even better is take that football stadium, let's say, and is your character there during the Super Bowl where people are yelling and happy and drinking beer and eating popcorn? Or is your character at the stadium in the middle of winter? Just think of the difference in the setting and the impact that that setting is going to have on your reader. What about other settings? How about an airport? Would you get a different feeling from going to the Harrisburg International Airport today than you would have back at Christmas? I'm told that the Harrisburg Airport has about a 91% decrease in business right now. So you're kind of walking around the airport looking, and it feels empty. And is that going to help you? Maybe if you're telling the story during a time like this, it will help your reader understand that, boy, this is a very, very difficult time. So details are absolutely critical. The small nouns and verbs. Try to stay away from adjectives and adverbs. But let's talk about nouns and verbs. Now, I had a good friend in a writer's group that wrote science fiction. So for those of you, and I have a very good friend who writes wonderful fantasy. For those of you that are into science fiction, and many are into fantasy, my friend with science fiction, he sat down, it took him a year, a little over a year, I think 15 months, to create the world, because he was building a whole world unto itself. And so you don't have to do all that if you're telling mysteries or whatever, but you want to develop settings that are going to bring your readers into it. The other thing to think about is how much freedom do your characters have? For example, is your character a college student at the University of Vermont and has a certain amount? He can decide whether or not he wants to stay in and study, go to the library, go out and drink a beer. How about if he's an Army recruit? Does he have that degree of freedom? Probably not. So as you develop your stories and your settings, think about factors such as what sort of freedoms does your character have and how does that impact your character? So what we want to do is talk about the magic of setting. That's what we're up to here. So be sure, again, and I repeat, that your reader knows the setting through the eyes of your character. So for those of you who are drafting a novel, think to yourself, what's your character like? Let's suppose your character sees a tall, 7-story, empty, red brick building. He's looking at it. And what does he see? Well, what does he see? Think about that for just a minute. What would your character see and what would he say about that? For me, course, many of you know I write military thrillers. And my character might look at that, Zach Kelly might look at that building, and he might say, I wonder if there's a back exit to that thing. Is there a chance if I go in there, I could get ambushed? Is there a terrorist in there? Who knows but he's looking at fields of fire or whatever, depending on where he is in the story. Another one that's much simpler and much easier is suppose that that you're at the shore. Elaine and I spent several wonderful summers at Sea Isle on the New Jersey coast, and we'd get down there in July, and oh man, go to the coffee shop, and people are laughing, and go out on the beach and running on the beach and seeing all this and the waves and all that stuff, talking to people, having fun. My next door neighbor lives there around the clock. When he's looking at this building, he's thinking, what? Oh God, I wish those people would leave. You know, I get so sick and tired of all the people here. I get so sick and tired of all the things going on. They're throwing their beer bottles around, and I can't get into a restaurant without standing in line. Or how about an architect? If he looks at the building, what is he going to see? Well, he's going to see the design, the beauty in the design. He's going to look at the various pieces of that building. Or a contractor, suppose your hero is a contractor. What does your hero see? Well, is it cheap construction? Or maybe he sees poorly hung doors or windows or whatever. So as a result, you can look and have 10 different people look at the same site and get 10 different responses. And so what is your character going to see? And see, what we can do is by putting it through the eyes of your character, that helps us tell about your character. You don't have to sit down and write your character's 5'2", eyes of blue, and all that sort of stuff. You can just show your reader all he needs about the character. Now, your senses. Another thing we talked about is the importance of your senses. And this is critical when you're developing your setting. So, for example, a lot of writers just use sight, which is the cardinal sense, sentinels, that dominates the scene. But close your eyes. What about sound? Can you hear them? Can you hear the waves on the beach? Can you hear the birds overhead? You want to bring your reader in by all the senses. Touch, the heat of the sand. And remember, we talked about smell. Smell is the scent that is most tied to memory. So as a result, if you are picking up a bar of soap and you smell the soap and it reminds you of your grandmother and this wonderful summers you spent with her on the farm and all of the things that you did together, the things she used to bake and all that, you can actually, you know, and many of us for interest are developing and working on memoirs, and the smell can be a terrific emphasis to settle you back a little bit. And the important other thing on the developing your story is that function of time. What's going on around your character? Now, I just finished a novel, and what's going on around me? Well, a virus is going on around me. Politics is going on around me. You've got to set your story and your hero in kind of the bigger picture, so your readers can get a feeling of why they do things what they do, why I'm here rather than out riding my bike today, because I'm supposed to stay inside, unless unless I'm out exercising or going to the grocery store or something like that. I know some people are opening up faster than we are in Pennsylvania, but right now it's a pretty slow time. Now I'll have to let you in on one of my secret weapons, and what I call the visual dictionary. Now this one, it goes yearly, and this is an older one, so I have to be very careful about what I use. But let's suppose that I'm developing a setting and I'm looking at a house. Have you ever sat and said, now, what kind of windows would it have in the house? And we ever say, now, what in the world kind of windows do I have? Well, if you went to your visual dictionary, you'd see on page 189 the different windows. They have French windows, casement windows, horizontal pivoting windows, sliding windows, accordion windows, double hung windows, louvered windows. In my latest book, I was able to put in, somebody was looking at the house, I could say, hey, they had the French windows because the lady of the house is an artist and she likes the light and the air. See, and had I not had this reference, I would have had to dig that out. Now, let's suppose that you're interested in having a dinner party. Now, if I'm interested in having a dinner party, I probably don't need a lot of different classes. But let's suppose I'm hosting some big deal person and I want to really impress them. So what classes might I want to use? Well, I might want to use a champagne flute or a Bordeaux or a Burgundy. I certainly wouldn't want to put a Bordeaux in a Burgundy glass, or brandy sniffer, or don't put your port in a brandy glass. Now for me, it's easy. At the bottom, a beer mug. So that makes life pretty easy for me. But if I'm hosting somebody that's pretty specific on this stuff, I can look at it in my book, and my hero can say, well, I think I'm going to get a brandy glass because she's very special. Now, this thing ranges from astronomy, clothing, men and women's clothing, music, sports, transportation, the house. It has just about everything. For example, when I'm every July, I go up to New York for Thriller Fest, and I spend a lot of time on the subway. And so I want to put my hero on the subway. So what do? I go to my class, my book, and I say, okay, the subway station, you got a changer's booth, got the entrance, the exit turnstile, the fixed stairs. There's a platform edge. There's a safety line along the platform edge. And I can put my reader right into that. There's also one on what a subway car might look like and all the pieces of that. So I think that I've used that for a long time, and it's helped me a lot. And, there's always trying to find the one right word. And oftentimes you want that one right word, because if you can't use that right word, it just doesn't fit. And this is a terrific technique. It's called the Facts on File, the Visual Dictionary. If you have any trouble finding it, I'm more than happy. Please feel free to send me a note to my website, www.donhelin.com, and there's a contact on, and ask me, I'll give you the reference, but you should be able to find the visual dictionary. Now, for those of you that are mystery writers, whatever, again, my hero is a military guy. And many of you know that I spent a career in the military. But it's been a few days since I retired from the military, and I may not be current on what's going on now. So what do? I grabbed the illustrated book for Special Forces. And in there, normally, what sort of hand weapon does my hero have? And he has a Glock Model 17. And I pull that right out of the book, and that'll tell me the rate of fire, how many bullets it carries and stuff like that, because that can be important. You know, most people think there's only 6 rounds in a gun. Well, if you're the hero and your opponent has 6 rounds, but you got 7, that gives you some pretty good shape. So for a handgun, and then for a machine gun, you got the Heckler and Koch 9mm MP5 submachine gun. And it tells you the effective distance, and it tells you all that stuff. More than you probably will ever need to know, unless your hero is working his way through some problem, and he may have to have a weapon. And the last one I just want to mention very quickly is I have a sniper in my last book. And what kind of a sniper weapon will I have? Right off the top of my head, I wasn't sure. But what I was able to do is go to my friendly Special Forces, and I found out the weapon of choice is the M24 sniper rifle, and also gives me the special sight and the fact that it is effective to at least a half mile. See, these are things that will help make sure that you don't make mistakes and people say, well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Because my hero, it's not me, my hero has to know what he's talking about. So oftentimes, your reader likes new places to go. And that is why we have a passport to panic. And what we can do is take and give your reader a passport along with my hero. Because as you may remember, some of you know that in Devil's Den, Zach, my hero, is a member of the Irish Mafia, tries to assassinate him. And he's got to go to Ireland to find out why there's a contract on his life. Now, Elaine and I did that. And if you have a chance to go different places that you think you might want to use, I hasten to add, take good notes, because it'll be worth its weight in gold to you. And let me just give you a little bit about what Zach found. This is Dublin, 5:00 p.m. When they reached O'Donovan's at Merritt Square, Zach checked his watch, 5:00. They were right on time. Reaching under his coat, he could feel the reassuring lump of the M9 holster on his belt. Now, I have to admit that as I was going around, I didn't have to reach behind and feel for a pistol, but Zach kind of got a problem, and he needs to do that. Zach looked around once more, then pushed open the glass door, and the two entered. Okay, now just kind of shut your eyes and see if you can visualize what O'Donovan's at Merritt Square might look like. Zach entered. To his right stood a 5-foot-high wooden bar with more than a dozen men sipping their Guinness. Each of the men had a shot glass by their beer. Lots of whiskey going down too. Zach followed Shelia toward the back, where a solid-looking man sat at a 4-foot round wooden table, sipping a glass of whiskey. Short, burly, and wide shoulders, he looked like he might have been a great rugby player. The man wore his flat cap down over his forehead, covering much of his bushy brown hair. When they reached the table, he tipped his hat. Top of the evening to you, Cousin Shelia, and who might this lad be? Shelia leaned over and kissed his cheek. Terry, this is my friend Zach Kelly. Zach, my cousin, Terry McHugh. Zach reached down and shook hands with McHugh. Any friend of Shelia's is a friend of mine. They serve a decent pint of dark Smithwick's ale, Kelly, or you may want to try a Paddy's whiskey. We call it the water of the gods. He pushed his cap back on his forehead. The name like Zach Kelly, do you have any Irish blood flowing in those veins of yours? Zach pulled out his wooden chair for Sheila and one for himself and sat down. No, I'm sorry. I come from a long line of Norwegians and Swedes. Aye, the Vikings arrived in the mid-1800s, spent a number of years dumping their junk all over my Irish ancestors. Yeah, let's not go there, Sheila glanced at the menu. I think I'll try a Smithley. A little early for an Irish whiskey. Why don't you try one, Zach? A tall, slender woman in a black skirt and white blouse hurried over. She looked at Zach, eyebrows raised. Sir? How about a couple of Smithwicks? Zach asked. Yes, sir. She hurried off, her ponytail bobbing behind her. Can you see her? Sure. McHugh sipped his whiskey. Now, lovely glass, what may a poor Irishman do for you? And then we go on. Sheila takes just a couple of sentences to tell McHugh the problem, and McHugh is supposed to try to. She's hoping McHugh can help him get a lead on where to go. So we won't have to give any more. But what we're trying to do is to put that your reader into that place. So they have a passport, and that passport could lead to some panic if they get into trouble. Each summer, I end up in Manhattan for international thriller writers. And I made my book number 4, set my book number 4 in Manhattan. And here's where it becomes very, very important to be exact. Because if your reader catches you not being exact, you could be in trouble. So here we go. This is the start of a section, and it'll go pretty quickly. Zach and Laura hurried along 44th Street, until they arrived at 200 West 44th Street. Here it is, Zach said, Carmine's Restaurant, supposed to be one of the best Italian restaurants in Midtown. And it actually exists, and it's there. The host led them to a table and held a chair for Laura. As Zach sat, he said, we're meeting a young woman who should be here shortly. Her name is Sheila. Yes, sir, I'll bring her over as soon as she arrives. Wow, look at this place, Laura said. It's huge. And I understand the portions are also. They call them hearty portions. Great, Laura said. I'm feeling hearty. And you may remember, or I wanted to share with you that Laura is on vacation with Zach, and she's his 19-year-old daughter. Zach glanced up to see Sheila approaching their table. You may recognize that name from my first book, Devil's Den. And this is one of the fun things of writing a series, because as I was moving through, as I was writing my third in the series, I had probably a half a dozen people say to me, whatever happened to Sheila? We kind of enjoyed her. Well, here she is, back again in book 4. Zach glanced up to see Sheila approaching the table. She still had the same slender figure, long black hair, and light blue eyes. Her milky white skin was accented by a short black sleeveless dress. A colorful scarf wrapped around her neck, and that set off the package. Zach almost tripped when he rose to meet her. Tongue-tied, he managed to squeak out, Hi, Sheila, you look beautiful. She walked up to him and gave him a hug. The touch of her soft breast shot an electrical shock through him. It had been almost 18 months since their last time together in Ireland and Gettysburg. What a time they'd had. Why hadn't he fallen up with her? She leaned back and looked up and kissed him on the cheek. Hello, laddie, nice to see you again. He loved her Irish accent. It almost sounded like music. Sheila, it's great to see you. You remember my daughter, Laura? Hi, Laura. I remember we met after your father and I returned from Ireland. Laura smiled up at her. Wasn't it nuts? Boy, it's cruel to see you again. I'd love to hear more about what it's like to be a medium. We learned earlier that Shelia is a medium. Shelia laughed. I'll be glad to tell you some stories. During dinner, Zach shared with Shelia what had brought them to New York. He told her about the death of his father and his frustration about the dirty cop. While they drank their coffee, a cloud seemed to drop down over Shelia's eyes. Zach put his hand on her arm. What's wrong? Hey, Laura chimed in. You look down all of a sudden. This is really hard for me. What's wrong? What's wrong? Sometimes I hate being a medium. She lapsed into silence. Then she said, probably think I'm nuts. I would never think that, Zach said. Me neither, Laura replied. Zach sighed. All right, as you've been talking, I've been getting messages. Zach now realized what Shelia was talking about. She'd sensed messages from the other side. Should he hold her back until they were alone? Was Laura ready for this? Now we have fun because here comes Laura. I know what you're thinking, Kelly. Laura pointed her fork at her dad. I'm not a little kid anymore. Whatever Shelia has to say, I want to hear it too. Shelia looked at Zach, who nodded. Okay. As you've been talking, I've been receiving messages. I don't know for sure, but they could be from a friend of your father's. Zach felt as if someone had punched him in the chest. He stared at her, mouth open. Zach, you're in terrible danger. You should quit what you're doing and not probe any further. You're running a risk not only for yourself, but for your mother and your daughter. Okay, so what we've tried to do is, while we're doing the setting here, is just slip in a little bit of setting. Not a lot, but just a little bit. Okay, one last one on our passport, on our trip around the world. So get your passport ready for Asia. And this is my latest book, Roof of the World, which takes place in Tibet. Zach has recently arrived in Tibet after going to Beijing first. And now, 30 minutes later, Zach and Sky, that's his partner, walked along a sidewalk from the hotel along a busy street. Not many cars, but lots of bikes. Okay, shut your eyes and see if you can visualize. We're going to the Lhasa kitchen, Sky said. I think it has the best food in the city. And it's right down Barker Street from the hotel, which is the city's main drag. Oh, Zach thumped himself on the forehead. That reminds me, I need to pick up things for my daughter. I can't go to Asia without bringing some real cool souvenirs home for Laura. How old is she? Sky asked. 19, going on about 35. Sky chuckled. I remember being 19, and I think I can keep my eyes open for some really pretty jewelry and maybe some colorful scarves. The restaurant is upstairs, and it looks out toward the main square in front of the Johung Temple. Nice view. Zach followed her up the stairs to a hostess at the top with menus. Okay. The restaurant was arranged in a series of long tables, giving it a welcoming look. Okay, now we're up in the restaurant. All right. Once they were seated, Zach breathed harder. Whew, I feel the attitude now. Got a whale of a headache coming on. Remember, if you hadn't, that Tibet has an altitude of around 12,000 feet. It's why it's called the Roof of the World. Drink lots of water, Sky said, and take it easy today. No jogging? Zach said. She laughed again. He loved her laugh. Sky ordered. The waitress brought bottled water and poured each of them a glass, then left. Sky took a big drink. Don't drink any tap water, even in your room. You'll be very sorry if you do. I understand, Zach said. Been there, done that. When the food arrived, she held up bread. This is naan bread. The yak meat is deep fried in a pastry pocket. Then there are noodles, rice, and other tasty meals. Can you taste that? Can you get the feel for it? And if you're a good boy and eat all your food, you'll get a mouth-watering apple fritter for dessert. So everything is going well. We're eating, we're in a nice restaurant. About halfway through the meal, Zach heard a stirring in the crowd and glanced up to see two men in black uniforms with badges at the top of the stairs. One pointed at their table, the other had a weapon drawn. Sky let out a deep breath. Looks like the Chinese have found us. Zach straightened. Crap. He didn't even get a chance to eat his apple fritter. Now, do you see what I mean about how important it is to put your reader into the story, and then what you want to do as you're going along, you want to make sure they know where they are. Each section should set the table. You've got conflict, and you've got your plot building, and you can learn a little bit about each reader, each of your characters as we go. Okay, let me just close off with kind of a fun story. Some of you may know Vicki Thompson. Vicki Thompson is a good friend and was a mentor of mine through Penn Writers. And she writes a terrific series on 1895, historical mystery, 1895 New York City. Her heroine is a midwife. And of course, she gets into all kinds of difficult positions and kind of unsavory parts of the city. And her partner is a police detective. And you find out that it's important because in 1895 New York City, the police won't try to solve a crime unless they're bribed to do it. Well, anyway, in one of her books, Vicki has a chase going on through the city. And there's a chase going on, and she always asks her readers to give her comments, give her feedback. One of her readers sent an email to her and said, Vicki, that wouldn't work. Because that day in New York City in 1895, there was a hurricane, and they wouldn't have been able to rush through the city like that. Now, you talk about needing to get your facts right. Vicki always chuckles, but she said, you know what? I find myself checking the weather as I'm talking about different stories. Okay, now I think a great novelist doesn't just set the scene, but he unveils a really unique place, which resonates, with a sense of time and wonder, social threads, and destines the universe for the story for all. Not only describing a setting, but you really are building a world that your readers hopefully will have a passport to be able to enjoy and will be able to experience all that it has to offer. Now that concludes my formal presentation